Okay, it's live. So, ladies and gentlemen, this has been like the week of Rahu. I think we got to declare this Rahu week. And today I'm bringing a special person who has been here before to talk about his revelation with Rahu, some of the secrets of Rahu, some of the things that he has come in terms with knowing about Rahu that I'm pretty sure most of us do not know. And he is pretty much a reborn saint. And he is probably one of the few purest white men you'll ever come to see. Please help me welcome Ernst. Wilhelm.
Okay. Well, thanks for the little, aggrandization, the huge aggrandization of me.
You're
I'm just a dirty white boy when it comes down to it, and I listen to journey rock and roll music.
Yeah.
But
but you're the reborn saint. I think you're the purest person I've ever just known. I don't know why I see that, but just the purest and the most humblest. So I just know there's this saintly quality to you.
All right, well, we'll go on with Rahu and forget the old Ernst Wilhelm.
I know.
Important things.
Whenever I'm just like in front of you, I'm like, man, I just want to be next to his feet for the next 5-6 hours and just learn. So thank you for coming.
Okay, well, 5-6 hours, let's go for it.
All right.
Really, seriously.
Hey, I got my computer ready. So yeah. Okay. So please tell us your knowledge, the things that you're going through with Rahu.
Yeah. So Rahu's always been very interesting to me, really important. Even long ago when I did a couple years of Western astrology, I really focused on Rahu. And, being someone who wants to understand people on the deepest level possible, I always put a lot of emphasis into Rahu. And I taught a tremendous amount of things about Rahu throughout my career teaching astrology. But I'll tell you, I really didn't understand the very fundamental, basic, most intrinsic, important things about Rahu until I simultaneously went through my Rahu maturation at 42. And at the same time, I had just entered my Rahu Dasha. So I had all this Rahu influence going on. And just gave me this whole greater awareness of Rahu that I just, no way I was going to really fully comprehend when I was in my Moon Mars or Sun Dasha. Or before I was 42, right? Yeah. And all of a sudden I'm getting both Rahu Dasha and 42 on top of everything. And it was not only a life changer, of course, but a whole game changer in respect to my understanding of Rahu. And what I can say is, what I've learned through that is that I love Rahu. Rahu is an awesome planet.
Absolutely.
And I think anyone who truly understands Rahu, and if you listen to this, hopefully you will, I was going to go, all right, Rahu's a badass and a friend, okay? But badass friends are not always, don't always feel that way. And that's really the case with Rahu. So I really want to talk about what I think is the most important parts of Rahu, the most fundamental, important things, the bottom line as I understand it. And of course, on top of that, there's millions of other things that we hear about all the time. But I want to get to that real focus. But as a foundation, I want to talk about a few basic things so we all are on the same page about Rahu. First of all, in Brihat Parashara, the first 2 chapters are very important. In the first chapter, he talks about the creation, really short chapter. In the second chapter, he talks about the avatars of Krishna or Vishnu. And most of us, we just kind of skim through those when we want to get to the astrology part.
Yeah.
But there's a world of astrology in those first few pages, those couple dozen sutras that you really can't afford to neglect. Now, one thing we know is that Rahu is an avatar of Vishnu, as are all the planets, and he's specifically the Varaha avatar. And Varaha avatar, there was a time when a demon, his name was Hiranyaksha, he stole the earth and he took it down below the waters. And when the Devas were told to create and populate the earth by Brahma, they're like, hey, we can't. The earth is stuck under the water and this demon has taken it down there, and what can we do? So Brahma prayed to Vishnu, and out of Vishnu's nose, a little tiny boar flew out. And this boar got bigger and bigger and bigger. Finally went underneath the waters and brought the earth from underneath the waters to the surface where creation could start. So here we have this myth where Rahu, it's not Rahu itself, but its avatar, rescues the earth so that creation can even start. And so one important thing we have to understand, and especially I think truth seekers and spiritual seekers have to understand, is that you have to deal with your Rahu. The reason we're on Earth is to deal with our Rahu. Rahu bringing the Earth to the surface is saying, hey, all these other things, all these other planets, you can work them out in meditation and contemplation. You can work them out on the astral plane. You can work them out on the causal plane. You know, you can work your Venetian desires out and issues on all those planes. But Rahu, you only can work that out on planet Earth. There's no escaping it. And a lot of times people try to escape Rahu, try to neglect that area of their life and avoid it. But doing so puts up a roadblock to our evolution and a roadblock to our eventual liberation even. So we can't ignore Rahu, and he's what we all have to work out here, okay? Because he brings it from the Earth.
So what did you meant by saying that you have to deal with Rahu on Earth versus being transcendental about the other planets?
Meaning, you know, say you have a desire for a mansion, okay? Which is how real estate's ruled by Mars, right? Yeah. Say you want an exalted Mars mansion with a Venetian flavor, with, you know, with luxuries inside. So let's say you want that desire. That's a Mars-Venus desire. Well, through enough meditation, that desire is going to fade away. It's going to go away, and you're not going to have to deal with it. Right. So you don't ever have to actually get the mansion and live in it and go, oh, I have my mansion, right? Now, Rahu, whatever house it's in, you need to get in touch with that house. You cannot become liberated. You cannot grow in your consciousness until you dive into that house of Rahu and deal with it, regardless of how nasty that house is. And any planets with Rahu, you have to deal with those planets. There's no avoiding them. You can't say, oh, I'm just going to meditate and ignore that whole Rahu pull. It'll come back to haunt you, and your meditation will never go where you want it to, or whatever other path you're on. So we have to work Rahu out. Rahu's the only one who said, hey, I'm bringing the Earth to the surface. He's delivering us the Earth. We have to work that out. Okay, so that's one thing I want to understood. There's no escaping Rahu. Okay, now, that sounds like a scary thing, right? Right. But hopefully when I get done, you go, okay, I don't want to escape my Rahu. I want to go for it, okay? Okay. Now, of those avatars, there's 9 avatars related to the 9 planets. 4 of those avatars are avatars that have full divine consciousness. That's Rama, Krishna, Narasimha, and Varaha. The other 5 avatars have divine consciousness, but I have a little bit of what's called jiva consciousness, which is self-consciousness, individualized consciousness. But the ones of Mars, which is Narasimha, Sun, which is Rama, Moon, which is Krishna, and Rahu, who's Varaha avatar, those avatars are fully God, okay, fully divine consciousness. So that lets us know these 4 planets are critical planets to our spiritual evolution, to achieving divine consciousness. The other planets, because they're avatars, they're incarnations, all have some jiva consciousness, some human consciousness. With those planets, we can indulge ourselves in a human living forever if we choose to, because they partake of human consciousness. But these other 4 planets, they're all there to develop ultimately our divine consciousness, and Rahu's one of them. So why should we be scared of Rahu? He's one of the top good guys, you know? Well, he's divine consciousness.
What we have come to learn from many other scholars that, okay, well, Rahu is a demon, Rahu is Rakshas. How can Rahu lead you to moksha? How can, because some of the, if you let's look at Jaimini Karakas, some of the astrologers, some big astrologers do not use Rahu as the Atma Karaka, because they're saying that a demon cannot lead you to moksha or liberation. So in your context, how can you provide more, supporting evidence towards?
Yeah, totally. We're going to do that. Because really, Rahu is the step that precedes liberation. Okay? So that's one thing I want to be understood, is that Rahu is really going to be important for our spiritual growth because his avatar is one of the avatars that has fully divine consciousness, whereas a lot of the other planets, their avatars have some human consciousness. Okay, so this makes us think, should make us think of Rahu in a more serious way. Now we all know the saying Sanivat Rahu, right? Like Saturn is Rahu, and Rahu gives the results of Saturn. That's a common rule that every astrologer works with, and because it works, it's a great rule. Well, in the formation of Rahu and Ketu, of their birth, that happened at the churning of the ocean. And the whole fiasco of the churning of the ocean was largely done because Brahma had promised a boon to the demon Swarbarnu to become a graha and be immortal, to become an immortal planet up there in the heavens. And upon promising this boon, Vishnu had to agree to it. And of course, Vishnu always arranges everything to get everything he wants first place. So he's the one who set things up. So Brahma made that boon in the first place. So this promise is made to this demon who's mortal, and an asura who's mortal, to become immortal and become a graha in the heavens. So they, at the same time, the devas were fighting the asuras, who are the demons, and losing as always. And so they decided they needed to become mortal and live forever so that they could win the war. So they called a peace treaty with the asuras, and because to churn the ocean. And out of that ocean, they were going to get the nectar of immortality along with a lot of other goodies, right? Mm-hmm. And upon drinking the nectar of mortality, they were going to become immortal. And their goal was to make sure the demons weren't going to get their share of the nectar. And Vishnu actually told them in this, he said, make sure that let the asuras have anything they want that comes out of the ocean, but you just get the nectar of immortality, the Amrita, and I'll make sure the demons don't get it. So they trust in him, they start churning the ocean. So they get Mount Mandara, which is the mountain that's considered to be at the North Pole. And they haul that mountain and they start churning this ocean after tying a big snake to it that they used as a rope. While they were churning it, the devas got at the front of the snake and the asuras were at the tail. But the asuras, being proud, said, hey, we don't want to be at the back end of the snake, we want to be at the front of the snake. So they changed sides and then they started churning and pulling on this snake, and the snake got kind of sick and dizzy from all that pulling and yanking. So eventually he started coughing up all these poisonous vapors and killed a lot of the asuras. But before that happened, when they tried churning it, the Mount Mandara was so heavy it just sunk to the bottom of the ocean. So Vishnu shows up, manifests himself as Kurma avatar, who's a giant tortoise, swims under the mountain, raises up on his back, and now Mount Mandara is moving around on this tortoise's back. Now, Kurma avatar is the avatar of Saturn. Okay, so here, Saturn's involved too. Saturn's involved in making Rahu exist. And that's a critical part of astrology. Saturn in our chart is, to a large degree, why Rahu exists. If Saturn sucks in our chart, how great can Rahu really serve us, right?
Sure.
We have a great Saturn, on the other hand, Rahu's going to do so much better. So Rahu in the myth, its birth, and therefore its life, is dependent upon Saturn, this Kurma avatar. And so in our charts, Rahu is dependent upon Saturn. And in fact, most of what we blame Rahu for, the miseries, oh, Rahu makes me miserable, and Rahu does this, and Rahu creates unexpected, the only reason he does all those things is because we're mismanaging our Saturn. Okay, you can imagine if a sick turtle is trying to help churn the ocean, how great is Rahu's life going to be, right?
Right.
So that's an important part. Don't ever look at Rahu and judge it until you've thoroughly judged Saturn. So otherwise you'll make
an example of how one can mismanage their Saturn and affect the Rahu, or how can they?
Saturn, sure. The fact is, when God creates the world, through our nervous system, all the life force descends into our nerves and we see creation, experience creation. But what we don't experience is God anymore. We have separation from God's consciousness. Our human consciousness gets separated from God's consciousness. So we have separation between our human consciousness and God consciousness, and that separation is indicative of Saturn. So how's that going to make us feel? It's going to make us feel empty, miserable, needy, scared, lonely. All these human emotions. All those empty needs create this huge hole in us. So we're all walking around with this big old hole in the middle of our chest, right?
Mm-hmm.
Well, that hole is the result of God manifesting this world and creating, and as a result of that, for us to manifest the world, we have to have a conscious separation from God, and our conscious instead goes into our nerves to experience this world and make it real. But we pay the price of that separation. And that hole we have is the separation that between our consciousness and God consciousness, or spiritual consciousness, or the intelligent, whatever you want to call it, the real thing, the truth, okay? So how are we dealing with that? How are we trying to fill that hole? You know, there's healthy and unhealthy ways to fill that hole. Essentially, there's ways that work and there's ways that don't work. If we fill it in ways that, if we focus on filling it in ways to work, we get to Rahu and we find Rahu's a friend, okay? And if we do it in other ways, we find that Rahu screws our life up completely. I'm going to talk a lot about that whole process, because that's the most important thing about what I'm going to talk about, actually, okay? All right, so Rahu is going to be dependent on Saturn. They're linked together. Now, Rahu's a node of the moon, right?
Yeah.
If it's a node of the moon, we have to study the moon and see if the moon's good to really understand if Rahu's going to do good, right? If the moon's trash, how good really can Rahu be, right? It can't operate as good if the moon's suffering, where a good moon is not going to have to get pulled around by Rahu as much, okay? So we need to analyze the moon always. Now, what really is Rahu and Ketu? That's what we have to try to figure out. Rahu and Ketu are the path of our consciousness. They're the path our consciousness is taking. We have a path of our body, right?
Yeah.
We wake up and we have a path in life, and our body goes here and experiences that, and our body goes here and experiencing that. And that path is indicated by the horizon. So the horizon is the first house on one side and the seventh on the other, right?
Yeah.
So, and what is the horizon? Well, the horizon is created by the fact that the surface of the Earth is revolving around the center of the Earth, right? So there's a point called the center of the Earth, and the Earth is revolving around that. The surface is revolving. As a result, we have a horizon that's constantly changing, and that's our Lagna. And seventh house, which is our path in life. Okay, that's the path of our body. Lagna is Deha, which is body, right? Okay. And that path leads to one thing, the death of the body. And the seventh house is a strong death-inflicting house, right? Okay. Then, and of course, the seventh house represents journeys and travels, right?
Yeah.
Long-distance travel and all that stuff. Okay. Rahu and Ketu are a very similar phenomenon. What we have is we have the moon is rotating around the Earth, right? And the Earth is rotating around the sun. So it's creating the ecliptic. The sign is the zodiac sign. And the moon is rotating around the Earth. And where it crosses the ecliptic is Rahu and Ketu.
Right.
That's the same as the surface of the Earth revolving around the center of the Earth. And where the horizon crosses the ecliptic, that's the Lagna and a horizon.
Yeah.
I hope I explained that well. That's kind of astronomy. So what I'm saying is the same thing is done to create Rahu and Ketu as the Lagna and seventh house. It's just we use a different center. For the Lagna and seventh house, the center is the center of the Earth. The rotation thing is the surface of the Earth. For Rahu and Ketu, the center is the Earth, and the rotation is the rotation of the moon. Got it?
Right. Okay.
So it's the same phenomenon that creates Rahu and Ketu. That's why Rahu and Ketu are opposite, just as the first and seventh house are opposite.
Right.
So the first and seventh house are the path of the body, and the Rahu and Ketu are the path of consciousness. So why consciousness? Because the moon is consciousness, and they're nodes of the moon, right? We know it's a path because it's this intersection with the ecliptic, just like the logna. It's a path. What path? Consciousness, because the moon, right? So this path of consciousness is what we're traveling with Rahu and Ketu, okay? And when does our consciousness change? When does our consciousness journey to better places? When does it grow? It does it when we lose body consciousness, when we die, is the big one, right?
Right.
When yogis go into deep meditation and lose body consciousness, their consciousness goes boom and grows, right?
Yeah.
So death, when the body dies, is when the consciousness surges forward and grows the most. But it's not just bodily death that's required, it's really death of bodily identification, okay? And ultimately, that's what Saturn is. At Saturn, we deal with these lacks that's created by body consciousness or ego consciousness. I think a better word is body consciousness. We see this as ourself. We see this body having experiences that are important, and that's what we're conscious of. And so we have a huge hole in us that's not getting filled. As soon as that body consciousness dies, which is the death of Saturn, of course, Saturn rules death, right? Then our consciousness is free to fully grow, which is Rahu and Ketu.
Because obviously Saturn is limits, it's boundaries. That's why we are not able to grow consciousness. Okay.
Yeah, Saturn, you're restricted, you're stuck, you're limited. Why? Because body consciousness is limited, right?
Yeah.
It needs food, it needs water, it gets beat up, it needs sleep, it needs rest. I mean, it's so paltry and limited, it's pathetic, the body, what it does, you know?
Right.
So death of the body, or death of body consciousness, is what gives growth of consciousness. Got it? Of true consciousness.
Right.
And that's why Rahu and Ketu are planets 8 and planets 9. And Sun through Saturn are planets, 1 through 7, with Saturn being that defining, limiting part, that limiting thing of ultimately ego consciousness and body consciousness. So I would never say Rahu's an egocentric planet. Saturn's the egocentric planet, but he comes through Rahu and makes Rahu seem egocentric. But that's not the nature of Rahu.
Okay.
Okay.
When you're saying that Rahu is that consciousness, our consciousness, how can we understand that on a practical level? So let's say if somebody who's ascendant and their ascendant lord is in the 11th house and Mercury is in the 5th house, they want to be this stockbroker, they want to be this financial analyst making billions of dollars in investment banking, but then Rahu, let's say, is in the 8th house in Scorpio. I mean, what is really happening? How is their consciousness is guiding them? How can we understand this phenomenon?
Okay. The moon is our consciousness.
Okay.
Right? The moon's our consciousness. Rahu is the path of our consciousness.
Path of the okay.
Our consciousness is going to go down a road, the same way our body goes down a road. Mm-hmm. And that's the road of our thoughts, our fears, our hopes, the stuff that's always churning there in the back of our mind. That's that road we're on. Okay. And our consciousness is going down this road. And that road is Rahu. So if you have someone who's got Rahu in the 8th house, for instance, their the road of their consciousness, the path of their consciousness is one of that's churning and creating unexpected things, hoping for unexpected great things, but oftentimes finding the opposite to be true, and ultimately struggling to feel safe or trusting with anything. So oftentimes they'll start being more quiet and shut down because they don't want to express everything they're feeling because it seems so crazy, because they have all these fearful thoughts and things that don't make sense, but somehow they know that's how life can be. So they're really aware of really all the pitfalls and faults that can just come out of nowhere, that no matter how much studying they're doing. So the stockbroker example, no matter how much studying he'd done, his consciousness is constantly concerned and worried that any moment he may not know something, he's going to lose all of his money.
Okay, I see.
and it will become a self-fulfilling prophecy in the end. Okay? So that's a simple example. So it's the path of our consciousness. It's the journey our consciousness is taking. It's going to the 8th house. Not a fun journey, right?
Right.
Okay. Now, Now, body consciousness is full of, as I mentioned, all these holes.
Mm-hmm.
And those holes plague us all the time. That's really where our pain comes from. And that body consciousness is really indicated by Saturn. The more troubled Saturn, the stronger our body consciousness and body identification, the more miserable we are. That's why people who have a strong sun or moon aspect to Saturn suffer a lot, because their body consciousness is stronger. Sun and moon are enemies of Saturn. They really trash Saturn, okay?
Yeah.
So, and this body consciousness creates a subjective consciousness. What's a subjective consciousness? Meaning, it's what's in this person's, the individual's consciousness, that determines the fulfillment or lack of fulfillment that they're going to have. So we can get two people who are both the same good looking, who both drive the same cars, who both have the same good looking wives, who both have the same good paying jobs. One person's happy, one's miserable. Why? Because of their subjective consciousness. Our subjective consciousness means the only thing that matters is me. And how I feel about myself is how I perceive other people feel about me. So whether people are nice to me or mean to me, if I feel good about myself, I feel fine about those people.
Right.
But if I feel bad about myself, whether people are nice to me or mean to me, I will feel bad about myself, you know? So our subjective consciousness is really what runs the show in the end. And all of KRSchannel astrology is about the experiences of our subjective consciousness. Now, in most cases, our subjective consciousness mirrors the concrete events of our life. But you know those people who are miserable in their lives, complaining about things, and from you're looking at it from the outside and say, I would kill for that life.
Right.
A lot of people say, I would kill to have a marriage like that. I would kill to have a job like that. But that person wants to kills themselves, is miserable, right? And wants to kill themselves, complains to the astrologer, is never happy.
Right.
Well, when the concrete reality dramatically varies from the subjective experience, that's when people are mentally imbalanced. That's what mental imbalance is, ultimately. One definition of it, okay? So our concrete reality doesn't have any effect on our fulfillment. Our concrete reality has an effect upon lots of other things. Our concrete life, oh, I have a big house, I have a small house. But whether I'm happy in a big house or happy in a small house is depends on my subjective reality, right?
Mm-hmm.
So the moon rules this subjective reality. And Vimshatri Dasha is basically this, how our subjective reality is shifting and constantly changing in accordance with the dashas, right? That's why it's all moon-based. So our subjective reality is the most important thing. And it ultimately becomes the most limiting thing to ourselves. Anyone who's suffering is suffering because their subjective reality dictates that they suffer. Okay? So when someone's subjective reality, we all have good and bad feelings about ourselves. We love some parts, we hate other parts, we think we're good at this and we think we're bad at that, and we're the subject of our whole universe. And everything that comes into our life is a reflection of that subjective relationship we have of ourselves. So if we feel bad about ourselves, we fall in love with someone who treats us badly.
Mm-hmm.
And then we go, oh, the whole world treats me badly. It's like, wait, Mr. Nice Guy or Mrs. Nice Girl was right there waiting to be with you, but you weren't even attracted to her. You didn't even notice him or her.
Yeah. Because
your subjective reality makes you only drawn to someone who's going to abuse you or whatever, you know? And so in other situations. Because our subjective reality is running the show ultimately. And then we blame things on the whole world instead of letting the whole world show us who we really are and how we really feel. Everything in our life and everything that's indicated by Vimshatri Dasha, Nakshatra, moon-based Dasha, is an omen, a reflection of our subjective reality. So if someone comes up and says, I hate you, and be mean to you, and you get hurt, that's an omen that's telling you there's parts of yourself that you're not happy with and don't like, therefore this person hurt you. And every time somebody comes up and loves us and makes us feel good, that's an omen for saying there's a part of you that you love and feel good about and feel worthy.
Mm-hmm.
And we have a mix of those parts in every area of our lives. Now, but we look at one of those things as being good, a nice person, a friend, and the other person as being evil and wrong and bad, right? But ultimately, there's no difference. They're both just showing us how we feel about ourselves, ultimately, right?
Right.
Now, up to Saturn, Saturn represents separations with people, not getting along with people, estrangements, loneliness, being put down by other people, being the low life, all that stuff, being bullied. Those are all Saturn things. Because when we're identified with body consciousness, that's how we see it. And that subjective reality starts ruling our life. And subjective reality largely rules most people's lives until we get past the 7 to the 8. Now, there's a keyword for all the numbers. And you know the nakshatras. We have Janma, nakshatra 1, Sampat, nakshatra 2, Vipat, nakshatra 3, Shema, nakshatra 4. These are the names of the nakshatratars. Well, those 9 nakshatratars are also the names of the numbers of the planets, the meanings. So planet number 1, Janma, is birth of mind. That's the sun.
You're talking about
when we get to number 7,
Parabala concept where nakshatras are divided into 3 groups of 9s.
You have 3 taras. You have 3 sets of 9, right?
Right. Yeah.
And you have 9 planets.
Mm-hmm.
And the keywords, the numbers of those taras, like tar number 7 is Vada, which means destruction and death.
Yeah.
That's 7th planet is Saturn. And that's what Saturn is, right?
Right.
Okay. Planet number 6 is Sadaka, which is the small fulfillments available in life. Planet number 6, nakshatra number 6, that's Venus, the little fulfillments that life truly offers. Mm-hmm. It's the little fulfillment, not the ultimate fulfillment, okay? Yeah. Then after number 6 planet, we have number 7 planet, which is Vada, destruction, Saturn. Number 8 is Matram, which is friendship. Number 9 is Param Matram, which is divine friendship or greatest friendship or highest friendship, okay? So here's Rahu, number 8 planet, sits in the 8th position, where with Hindu, numerology, number 8 number is Matram, friendly. And you're like, no way, there's no way Rahu's going to be my friend, right? But the truth is, when you step into Rahu, you realize that the whole world is truly your friend. So let's say the person who comes up and bullies you, and you feel bad and your feelings get hurt. A person with Rahu understanding goes, oh, this person's my friend for showing me that I have this lack of self-worth still, that I still got hurt by this person's putting me down. Wow. This person who got a job, even though I'm better at it, and now I'm angry, and I feel robbed, and I feel horrible about myself, and I feel like nobody loves me, and the boss doesn't like me. He's just showing me how there's still some parts of myself I don't like. And when someone comes, a beautiful woman or Mr. Right, and sits on their lap and loves us to death, and we go, oh, this feels great. Well, they're a friend too, telling us showing us something good about how we feel about ourselves. So when we realize that our subjective reality is ruling our existence, we can become friends with the whole world. Because the whole world is just a reflection of our subjective existence. And it's Rahu that shows us that everything is subjective, and therefore everything's a friend if we choose it to be. That's being in Rahu in a healthy way, where the whole world is our friend. And Rahu is really realizing that our happiness, our fulfillment, is based on our subjective fulfillment. It doesn't matter who's in our life. It doesn't matter what we're doing. If we're a miserable bastard, we're going to be a miserable bastard with Mr. Right or Mr. Wrong, with money or without money.
Right.
We'll just be a miserable bastard with money and Mr. Right versus a miserable bastard with Mr. Wrong and no money.
Yeah.
But it won't change. It's a subjective reality. When a person really understands Rahu, they realize that none of it matters. It doesn't matter whether I have this or have that. At the end of the day, I'm stuck with my subjective reality, and I'm a miserable bastard. I'm not happy. I'm a depressed bastard. I don't like myself enough. I have my doubts. And sure, someone can change that for 5 minutes while it's exciting and new. But after a few weeks, I'm back down to being the useless son of a bitch that I always am, right?
Right.
Our subjective reality dominates. Rahu teaches us, hey, it doesn't matter whether it's this or that. What's the difference? At the end of the day, you're stuck with your subjective fulfillment.
So is there a reason behind this philosophy why Rahu is the karaka of tobacco, alcohol, drugs, hallucinogen?
Sure.
Why is it that doing that? Because if Rahu wants us to be this world-friendly like entity and person.
Well, here's interesting. Rahu by itself, according to Gemini, won't cause drug problems. It's Rahu when related to Saturn. Gemini doesn't give Rahu as karakas. We give Rahu lots of karakas. But Gemini's the best book on karakas. He doesn't give Rahu as karakas for this, Rahu karakas for that. Ketu and Rahu both make a person a certain type of person depending upon the other planets influencing or with Rahu or Ketu.
Okay.
Because they're just the path of our consciousness. So with Saturn, it's a dark consciousness. It's a very pained, it's a big hole, right? The path of our consciousness is dealing with that big Saturn hole I talked about. And so, yeah, over-identified in the body, I'm going to stop that hole no matter what it takes. And I'm going to do drugs. I'm going to do this. That's just an extreme state of body identification. People who the minute they got a little sore throat, they take drugs. Oh, I'm in pain. My body hurts. Oh, I'm going to die. I got to take my painkillers. They're no different than someone who breaks up with their girlfriend and goes on a drinking binge.
Right.
The minute it hurts, oh, I got to get away from this pain. I can't live with this.
Yeah.
Like, why not? That's excessive body consciousness. That's all it is. Oh, I can't get away from this pain in my heart. Oh my God, it hurts so much. That's just excessive body consciousness. Saturn's. Everything Rahu's getting blamed for is a result of a troubled Saturn. That's all. So, yeah. So we don't need to blow Rahu out of the sky. We just got to blow Saturn out of the sky.
Right.
Right? Okay. So at Saturn, we deal with all the limitations and pains of body consciousness. And the truth of Saturn is all good things will end. Planet number 6 is Venus, the small fulfillments available in life. Planet number 7 is Saturn, death and destruction. It's always going to end. Even if you have the perfect thing, you're going to die. And as you get closer to death, you go, oh, I don't want to die. I'm going to lose that. I'm going to lose that. Or your spouse will die, your girlfriend will die, your mistress will die. It's all in the end. And it might, for some people, last a week. Another person might last 50 years. But at the end of the day, it don't matter. It's going to end. That's the only sure thing, right?
That George Harrison.
It doesn't matter how good it is. Somebody can say, oh, I'm so in love. And all you can say is, I got news for you. I'm not even going to look at your horoscope. I'm going to use my psychic powers. Yeah. It's going to end. One day, it'll end.
It's like that George Harrison album, Everything Must Pass.
Yeah, totally.
I mean, that title itself captivated me. I'm like, wow, everything must pass. That's it. You're just passing by.
I don't know if it, honestly, I don't know if it must. I just know it does.
It does, yeah.
It does, right? Okay, so it's all going to end, right? So no matter what you have, no how wonderful it is, it's going to start sucking. But here's the thing. It doesn't even have to end before it starts not being as good as when it was new. Because even things that don't end, the other thing Saturn rules is they get old, right? Yeah. So, oh yeah, I wanted that car so much, and I've had it for 5 years, and and I look at it, I don't get a feeling anymore.
Exactly.
I've had that wife, that husband for so many years, and I look at them, I just don't get that feeling anymore.
Yeah.
Everyone thinks everything's great, but it's just I don't get that feeling anymore. So everything gets old, right? Which means we get used to everything. And when we get used to something, the whole is not stimulated, and we start feeling empty. We get back to our old subjective, empty, miserable self.
Yeah.
And then we seek new adventures and new things and new excitements, try to stuff that hole. But none of it works. Ultimately, what has to be done is we have to deal with Saturn, which we have to have death of body consciousness. And once we have death of body consciousness, or death of self, then we can step into Rahu. So how do we do that? What's the key to that? Well, in the Hindu myths and stuff, they have many stories that talk about there's only two sins. Mm-hmm. Okay? Sure, in Christianity, they like to have 7 sins. The more the better, right?
Yeah.
But the truth is, Hinduism nails it right on the head there. There's 2 sins. And sin is ruled by Saturn. There's the sin of I and the sin of mine. Saturn's the planet that makes us sit around I, and my. I am good at this. I'm bad at that. My brother was nice to me. My sister was mean to me. I and mine all day long. That the more we think I and my, the more we're in ego consciousness. The more we're in ego consciousness, the bigger that hole gets. The bigger that hole is, the more our subjective reality starts creating our life. Okay? Now, here's the amazing thing about Rahu. So, Rahu takes your subjective reality, the deepest part of your subjective reality, and makes it real. Remember how the demon took the earth below the surface of the water, dark into the depths? This is a demon. This is all your negative stuff, all your negative thoughts, every bad thought you ever had, taken in the ocean. And then Rahu comes up and lifts it to the ocean and says, here's the earth, just the way you envision it in your worst, deepest thoughts. And so the bigger that hole, the bigger that subjective hole, the more negative thoughts we have. And then when Rahu Dasha runs, or Rahu Antardasha, all of a sudden, those worst concepts and fears manifest in a real way in our life. They become concrete. So Rahu manifests our subjective hole into a concrete form and blows our life out of the water. But it's not doing it. He's not doing it. He's just showing us, hey, this is how you really feel. This is how you really feel about yourself. This is the truth. Okay? So wherever Rahu, whatever house Rahu's in, we set ourselves up for disappointment. So let's say we got Rahu in the 2nd house. Rahu in the 2nd house person is always concerned and that they're going to be able to manage their life, take care of themselves, feed themselves, take care of their family. And this will usually be because they had some struggles, early on somehow, okay? But look towards Saturn to see why. So, like one person I know, Saturn in the 4th house, Rahu in the 2nd, they lost tremendous amount of land during World War II. As a result of losing all this land, they were poor. They also lost their bank account, because the banks shut down. They lost all like $250,000 in the bank. All disappeared. 4th house is your savings, your bank account, right? Saturn lost it all to them, and they were just to their family. They were just a kid, and so now they're working on the streets, hustling on the streets, killing rabbits to eat, searching for mushrooms. Just struggling, doing anything they can to, survive. So they've created this. They have this Saturnian fear now that life is a struggle. And deep in their consciousness, they're constantly churning these fears over. And they have a great life, a great education, get a great job, get great responsibilities. And at some point in life, Rahu ruins that whole 2nd house, and their worst fears all come to life. All because they're constant worry, constant stress. about managing things, it becomes a self-fulfilling prophecy, and the person loses everything valuable to them eventually. And second house, Rahu in the second, you've seen it decimate families, right?
Yeah.
Trashes a person's family life usually.
Right.
Does it for these people. And again, that's because constantly feeling that they won't be able to manage things, constantly feeling they won't be able to take care of things and take care of people, and having that in their consciousness, Rahu gives that to them. Rahu is going to create that reality.
But is there an instance where Rahu would create that positive reality where a person thinks like, no, I can always achieve my goal, I can always achieve this, and it gives it to them because they're thinking that?
You bet it'll do that. If a person's strong and solid in their Saturn in some respects,
yeah,
Rahu will manifest the positive parts, subjective qualities of themselves. Rahu's going to manifest our subjective reality in a huge concrete way. Now, we always have a mix of that, right? And that's why Rahu Dasha is so up and down. So many good things and so many bad things. Some of the most amazing things and some of the worst things, right? That's Rahu Dasha. And the other thing that happens with Rahu Dasha is there's all this unexpected. You're like, where did that come from? In the other dashas, we can say, yeah, Saturn Dasha, I lost my job and I'm sick, but you know, I sort of had it coming. You know, I sort of, or if you got a weak sun and then some Dasha comes, and you can go, yeah, I could see that was coming. I could see that train crash coming over the years. With Rahu Dasha, you're just walking down the street, right? And smack. You didn't see it coming. You had nothing to do with it. There was no reason it should have happened. It was totally unjustified, but it wasn't. It was something deep within your consciousness manifesting as a concrete event.
So when they, like the movies, they came out, The Secret, you manifest what you think inside. It's pretty much, they're talking
about what Rahu does.
Rahu, why do they say that Rahu is illusion? Rahu is Maya. How can this illusion, this smoke that Rahu is, can suddenly bring this three-dimensional world reality in front of you? In a physical form where you do feel the pain, you do get hurt, you do feel that you got blood coming out and your bank account is bleeding. But
don't all the planets bring one form of pain or the other?
Yeah, but
I mean, we're dealing with our lives, we're dealing with Maya, right?
Right.
So to say Rahu's Maya, then I'm asking, well, what are the other planets, Maya is all of creation.
Well, some astrologers will say like,
yeah, but they're just
engulfs the pure consciousness of other planets. Like what other planets are trying to teach you, Rahu engulfs that and gives you something which is completely away from that truth that you're here to learn. So is that
But it doesn't always do that. It only does if the planet's bad.
Okay.
If Rahu's with a nice planet, you'll get that stuff nice. That's why you get these people with Rahu windfalls, right?
Right.
Where they go into Rahu, like I met you, like right after, like a week after my Rahu Dasha, right?
Wow.
My Rahu Dasha starts, KRS calls me up, so I want you on my show. And I'm making pretty good money, teaching pretty good, but I've been hiding in my closet, doing my research, not advertising. KRS shows up out of the blue. I'm like, I really don't have time for this stuff. I'm busy with my research. I guess a little club, getting my name out a little bit might not hurt, right? Mm-hmm. So I go, all right, I'll do it. I wasn't enthusiastic at all, right? Boom, Rahu moment. Next thing you know, all my websites doubled their sales from one interview with you a couple years ago, right?
I love it.
I didn't see that one coming, right?
Yeah.
I didn't even predict that one. Rahu just gave it to me. I'm like, wow, this is kind of nice. When's KRS going to call me again?
Here he is.
Right? So, but that was a good Rahu manifesting, right?
Yeah.
Well, Rahu's in the 7th house in my chart. Well, one thing 7th house is sales and business, right?
Yeah.
So there was some good on my Rahu. The Lord of Rahu is in the 3rd house, which is a house of commerce and advertising. So, and it's aspecting the Rahu, and it's a good, nice 7th Lord. So, boom. Now then there's the parts of Rahu that sucked too, though. And out of them there came train crash. Like one thing they say, and if Rahu's in the 7th, There's a basic rule to Rahu. Rahu destroys the house it's in, unless it's the 10th house, in which case Rahu gives success, but then the rest of Rahu Dasha won't give the same level of success. So if someone becomes vice president in Rahu, they'll never become president. That's what happened to Al Gore. Okay, just based on the fact that he got vice president Rahu, he's never going to become president in Rahu Dasha. Maybe Jupiter Dasha, but not Rahu. So the other so Rahu will destroy the house it's in. Rahu's in my 7th house. Well, I was on a bike ride with my wife 6 months ago, and we got hit by a pickup truck while we were on a tandem bike, and my wife broke 8 bones. I broke 2 ribs.
Oh, man.
She's lucky to be alive. It destroyed her body, right? Trashed her. That's Rahu. It'll always really trash that house in Rahu.
Did it happen before after I met you guys in Sedona?
No, it just has happened 6 months ago. Right at the end of Rahu.
Wow.
Yeah. So that's the bad part of Rahu, right?
Yeah.
So Rahu, and neither of those were seen. I wasn't doing anything right when I got an interview with you. Just came out of the blue. Yeah. And didn't do anything wrong when I was riding my bike. I wasn't like whipping through traffic like I used to when I was young. Yeah. I wasn't running red lights. I wasn't doing tricks out in the street. I was just riding my tandem bike on the far side of the road, as far over as possible. And a 92-year-old guy just decided to run us down and drive home.
Hit and run, not even like stop.
He didn't know he hit us. He was so blind, he didn't know he hit us.
Oh my God.
So you think about it, you're like, that's Rahu. It comes out of the blue. But why did that manifest, right? Because Rahu in the 7th house, like for me, this is like really embarrassing, but I'm gonna say it, okay? Ever since I was a kid, I used to, whenever I envision myself, like after puberty, you start thinking yourself falling in love and stuff. Every little fantasy I had of falling in love, the woman or the girl as a kid, right, always gets killed. She always dies. Every single time she dies. Boom, she's dead. That one's dead. That one's dead. That one's dead. So I was like, I ain't got nothing to do with love. And so know what I did instead of love? I rode my bikes. I became a big bike racer, and I trained and I lived like a monk, and I went to bed at 10 every day, woke up at 6 a.m. every day, ate like a saint, and I just trained like a samurai bike racer, right? Well, the big part of it was because my subconsciousness couldn't envision a relationship that wouldn't end up in death.
Right.
And then here I am in Rahu, riding my friggin' bike, and I almost get my wife killed.
Yeah.
So I'm escaping from the fact that I don't want to get married and have somebody, be with someone who dies. So I escape as a kid to riding bikes. And as an adult, I'm riding bikes with my wife, having a good old time on a Sunday afternoon in Snatch.
Yeah.
So see, Rahu manifests this thing in my consciousness that had been there since day one, growing until Rahu Dasha comes and Rahu gives it to me, right? So that's the thing about Rahu. If you want to know what Rahu Dasha is going to give, don't go to an astrologer. They'll never be as accurate as if you just lay down and go, what kind of bullshit goes through my mind all day long? What kind of freaky stuff, both good, amazing, and sick and depraved, goes through my head? What kind of stuff do I dream about in my spare moments that I can't get rid of?
Yeah.
Then, well, write those things down and see 90% of those will happen in Rahu Dasha. That's 90% accurate technique. Okay?
Can a person change that Dasha knowing this fact?
I don't think you could change what Rahu Dasha is bringing until you've made complete peace with Rahu, where you truly can see everything as a friend, every experience as a friend. And because you need to go through those experiences to understand how your subjective reality is ruling your life. Rahu Dasha is here to teach us how the demons, Hiranyaksha, that demon who took Rahu into the depth of the dark waters, is ruining our lives, or maybe making it happen because of how our subjectivity is making all that happen.
Yeah.
And here's the funny thing about subjectivity. Subjectivity is all about ego consciousness, or what I call body consciousness. Because ego consciousness, if I say, oh, you're ego conscious, that sounds like an insult, right?
Right.
It's like, ooh, that's something wrong. But if I say you're body conscious? It's like, yeah, no shit, who's not, right?
Yeah.
It's like I like it better because that's what's really happening. It's not like you're just a unique, not you, I'm just saying, and someone I'm talking to is a unique individual who decided just to have a big ego. No, the result of having a body that has consciousness in it, which means life force is going through the body, into the fingertips, into the eyes, the nose, the mouth, and the ears, is to have body consciousness. That happens the minute we're born. And there's no escaping that, and everyone has it, right? So to go, ooh, you have ego consciousness, it's like this insult to something that's completely natural and normal. So out of that body consciousness, we create the two sins of I and mind. And the body just wants to exist. The I consciousness just wants to exist. It does everything to prove that it exists. And how does it prove it can exist? By how many times it says I every day. Now, in this world, it's a hard world because there's more cruel planets than gentle planets, right?
Yeah.
So for every one nice thing in life, there's two struggles, right? It's a hard world. So it's easier to focus, it's easier to say I about the hard shit things in life than about the good things. I got hurt. I am sick. I lost the game. I didn't win the race. I didn't get the raise, right? Because most of the time you don't. There's 40 guys working at the same office. So 1 out of 40 times you should get the special of the month, right? You should be the employee of the month.
Yeah.
But what do? 39 times, oh, I wasn't good enough. I wasn't good enough. Nobody likes me. My boss doesn't like me. He only likes that person because they look better in a skirt. You know what I'm saying?
Yeah.
It's the ego can get into I consciousness, which is what it wants to do, in negative things. They're more available than the positive things, right? But when the positive things happen, it's our turn and they're great. And then the wheel turns and then it's everyone else's turn. There's 6 billion people. Let them have their turn. It'll come back to you, right? But so what the ego does, while it's going around those other 6 or 7 billion people, they're getting their turn. The ego is finding, 6 billion reasons to feel bad about itself. And it says, I'm this, I'm miserable, I'm miserable. Because it's easier for the ego to say, I'm miserable than I'm happy. Yeah. Now, both are ego consciousness. They're both ego consciousness. I'm lonely, I'm in love. Well, we can say I'm lonely 360 days a year, and we can say I'm in love 5 days a year if we're lucky on this planet, right? Yeah. So well, so it's easier to identify, it's easy to commit the sin of I on the bad things, right? Now, it's just as big a sin to commit the sin of I on the good things in life. You know what I mean? It's not, the problem is,
but is it really a sin to really use the I? Is it really a sin to just use
every time you use the I, it's a sin. Why? What is sin? Sin is what makes you miserable in this world. Every time you think I, you're setting yourself up for misery. Every time you say my, you're setting yourself up for misery.
So how should you perceive that then? Instead
so how
of
do you
I,
do it?
what should you do?
So to get to Rahu healthily, you have to destroy Saturn, which is you have to destroy the sin of I and mine. You just refuse to think I and mine. You just root it out of your head and you replace it with other stuff. Replace it with your favorite rock and roll song and pretend you're singing that rock and roll song to God.
Yeah.
Replace it with anything that's not
instead of I, what about we?
What?
We or us. Is that still considered I? Because instead of I want to be more collective consciousness like
no, then that's out of I. Now, so the whole goal of life is to get out of I consciousness. Okay. When we're out of I consciousness, we're done with Saturn. Once we're done with Saturn, that subjective whole disappears. And then we're at Rahu in a healthy way, which is the friendly way, where we're at friends with everything in the world because we understand everything's subjective. Nothing can make me feel different than I feel about myself. Yeah. So what's to love? What's to hate? What's to want? What's not to want, right? That's the true state of Rahu. That's what Rahu's trying to teach us. That's a very exalted state. Okay? It's not the last state of number 9, number Ketu, but it's an exalted state. Now, how important is this? I want to use another mythology, which is not sorry, mythology, another story of history, which is the Mahabharata War, the KRSchannel War. So here's Arjuna. I don't want to fight. I don't want to kill my relatives. How can I do this? How can, how can I fight for my kingdom and kill my relatives? How is that any more right than my relatives killing me for my kingdom, right? I am mine, I am mine. He's all caught up in the sin of I am mine in the beginning of the Gita, right? And Krishna goes, hey, dude, forget that. Forget your I consciousness. Forget your body consciousness. You're a warrior. This is your dharma to fight, right? He goes, all this is only done because of me. And I am going to drive your chariot and make sure you do it right. That Krishna driving the chariot is Rahu in perfection, meaning in a perfect state. In fact, in Tarot, we have the major arcana cards, right? And what a lot of people don't know is that the major arcana cards relate to the planets, with 2 cards per planet. The cards that relate to Rahu are the Hanged Man and the Chariot. Okay, so Krishna basically tells Arjuna, everything's done through my own accord. Everything is, this whole war is being done because of me, not you. You're not killing your relatives. I'm killing your relatives. That's what Krishna says. He says, I'm everything. Look inside my mouth, I am everything. And I'm doing all this. So you just be what you are, the Hanged Man. The Hanged Man in Tarot, for instance, is just being in a completely detached mode of being, just letting life happen, not being the doer. Because the minute we say I and mine, we run around like idiots, right?
So an example, if somebody's just going out there killing people unconsciously, I'm not killing you because I have something against you. I'm just doing it because I'm a killer. And this is my dharma to kill you. How can we justify that consciousness with what
well, first, we never really know where their consciousness is, right? Now, there's the concrete reality and the subjective reality. We can never know what somebody's subjective reality is by studying their actions. Okay? But we can judge somebody's concrete reality, right? We can say that's not a healthy thing to do.
Yeah.
So going around blowing people away is not a healthy thing to do.
Right.
But we can't even begin judging a person's subjective reality. Lord Rama shot Bali in the back with an arrow while he was in a duel with somebody else. That's like a terrible thing to do, right?
Yeah.
Christ got angry at a fig tree because it didn't give him some figs, and he cursed it to wither and die. And the tree just didn't have any figs. Maybe it was out of season. I don't know.
Yeah.
Not a nice thing to do, right?
Right.
Krishna, oh my gosh, what didn't Krishna do that was a concrete reality F, that he shouldn't have done, right?
Yeah.
So all saints, all avatars always do a concrete thing that we can judge, but we can't judge anyone's subjective reality. We don't really know where they're coming from. We can't judge it. And when we do judge it, what do? We go, I think they're evil. I think that was a bad thing to do. What are we doing? We're just going to the sin of I. And in the Srimad Bhagavatam, it says, people who talk about the sins of others go to the same hell as they do.
Wow.
And it makes sense, because the minute you do, you start giving, I think this, and I would never do that. Well, you don't know what you're never going to do until Rahu Dasha comes.
Yeah.
Right? So, all right, so get off track here. So the ideal Rahu is Krishna driving the chariot with Arjuna. Arjuna has totally surrendered to life. But he's not totally surrendered. He's no longer thinking, I can't kill my relatives. He's no longer stuck in I and mine. He's stuck in his dharma. He's a warrior. It is his duty to fight. And that's really the only way to get through the I and my in one piece. The essential thing, such an important part of astrology. We have to be able to follow our swadharma. which is our inner inspiration. And in the astrology, they have the Raj Yogas, angle trine Lord Raj Yogas.
Mm-hmm.
And then there's the evil planets, right? And the good planets for each lagna. That there is a whole system to see if the person's following dharma, moksha, kama, dharma, which is, inspiration.
Right.
Moksha, liberation. Moksha, liberation is just liberation from worldly suffering, okay? Freedom from worldly suffering and toil. Well, you could be in jail and not have any worldly concerns, right? You don't have to worry about food. So moksha at this point is just this idea of not having responsibilities in the world, okay? Then there's kama, which is fulfillment of desires. Then there's artha, which is material well-being. These are the 4 goals of life. Those chapters in Parashara deal with those 4 goals of life. If a person has moksha and no dharma yogas, if they have moksha yogas and no dharma yogas, they get into drugs. They just want to, and they live lackluster lives. The essential yogas are the dharma yogas, which Parashara calls the Raj yogas, the angle trine lords, but not all angle trine lords will work. You got to follow those rules explicitly. Those are the people that at the end of the day, no matter what befalls them, no matter how bad they get the shit kicked out of them, how many people ruin their lives, how many miseries they have, if a person has all their dharma planets, the potential dharma planets in their chart causing the dharma yogas, at the end of the day, they're going to follow their inspirations. And when we follow our inspirations, we don't think I and mine. That's why Krishna said, you have to do your own swadharma, follow your own inner inspirations, the own inspirations of yourself, even if you're not even very good at that. And that's better to do than doing something really well that you're not inspired to. And the reason is because it's only by following that inner inspiration that we naturally stop thinking I and mine. If we're following what really inspired, we're not, at the end of the day, how much money did I make? How much of my money did I get paid? How many of the people gave me my money? It's not I and mine. It's not how many people like me now that I'm doing this. When we're following our inspiration, whether the whole world hates us, whether we're poor, we're going to do it. Yeah. And some people, only a few percentage of people will do that full percent, because it's really rare to get a chart where all the dharma planets are forming dharma yogas. Mostly there'll be a dharma yoga and it'll get afflicted by one of the evil planets. And that gets really painful because the person has inspiration, but then they always let needs of validation and the worldly needs get in the way of that, so they don't succeed in it fully in that joy of following their inspiration. So the key, follow our inspirations no matter what. It's the most important thing in life. You're better off following your inspirations and being on the street than living in a castle not following your inspirations.
So if I was to ask you at the state that you're at, in the dasha that you're in, say, Ernest, do you think O.J. Simpson is guilty? How would you answer that? Would you say, I think he is not guilty, or I think, I don't know? What would you answer, knowing this philosophy? Okay.
I would study the chart and come up with my idea of if I thought he actually committed the crime or not. I would just look at the chart and say, okay, I do think he committed murder.
So you are again saying, I do think.
Yes.
I commit, so you're bringing that I in. So you see how it can.
And then you judge something, you're in I consciousness,
Right. So you can't get away from it. Pretty much it's very hard to get away from it.
When you're communicating with people, it's a mode of communication.
Okay.
You know what I mean?
Yeah.
It's more what's going through your head when you're alone.
Okay, that's what you mean. Okay, because I'm asking you a question, so obviously you have.
It's like this. It's like, as an astrologer, because lots of astrologers are watching us. Are you thinking, what the hell did Jaimini say? Or are you thinking, so many people want to come to me for consultations as soon as I figure this sutra out, I'm going to become a famous astrologer. Yeah. What's in the back of the person's mind?
Right.
One is, and then when both people finish their Jaimini book, both people are going to say, I have a Jaimini book. You want to buy it?
Yeah.
but one was done with I consciousness, the other one was done with inspired consciousness of just this desire to know what Jamie was saying, right?
Yeah.
So, but at the end, the concrete reality is they both write a book.
Right.
And they have the fame from that book.
And what about the maturity that you were talking about, I think before we started recording, the maturity of Rahu?
Okay.
Have you experienced that? What was that about? What is
Rahu matures at 42.
Right.
And know how I said you really can't escape Rahu.
Mm-hmm.
You know, you have to, at some point in your life, you have to embrace Rahu. You have to go for whatever crazy stuff Rahu's making you dwell on and crazy about, right? Whether it's a good or bad thing. Eventually, you have to jump into that ocean with Rahu. You have to go for it. You can't avoid it. But it's very easy to avoid it until 42. When Rahu matures at 42, at that point, you're going to get a lot wetter than you ever have. Okay? And that's why Rahu matures at 42, Ketu matures at 48, right?
Yeah.
And 42 is the beginning of the whole midlife crisis thing.
Right.
That all starts at 42 with Rahu, where a person, you know, sort of goes into their craziness or their genius more, or perhaps both. Because really, we're all crazy geniuses. We're crazy on some things and geniuses on the other. And Rahu's going to manifest that reality, but that concrete reality that Rahu's going to manifest, we have to take the path of those experiences. Whatever house Rahu's in, whatever sign's in, we have to experience that house and sign.
But maturity doesn't mean
we'll tend to not embrace it. We'll tend to not really embrace those experiences until Rahu matures.
So
When
is
Rahu
the maturity
matures,
point as a positive thing, even though you're saying that it could be a negative, but maturity, shouldn't it be as a positive attribute?
And it can be both. It can be a mix. You know, it'll be a mix. I mean, Rahu, you almost always have a mix of stuff. And with all planets, you get a mix. No planet's all trash or all good, right?
Yeah.
They're always a mix. Same with Rahu. It's just Rahu will create those greater extremes because Rahu has so much energy behind it, because all this churning of your consciousness for your whole life all of a sudden flowers, right?
Right.
So Rahu, whether it's the good stuff or the bad stuff, it's just shocking in its extremes that it can take a person. And, you know, I've been in Rahu Dasha, I made it through Rahu, no one died almost, you know.
Yeah.
I made it to Rahu Jupiter, all right, cool. No one's going to die in the near future, right?
Yeah.
And stuff. But, you know, a tremendous amount of extreme if things happen to me in Rahu, one of which I mentioned, the other ones which I won't. Well, I mentioned two of them, right? That KRS called me and I got ran over by an old guy.
Right.
So those are like two extreme events, you know, but there was many more, and you know, extremes in both directions. And you're just going to get that in Rahu. You'll get those extremes in both directions, hopefully. But yeah, some people will have extremes in the negative direction and other people have extremes in the high. And to understand that, you just really have to study Saturn really well. Like, for instance, my chart, Saturn's my 6th lord. And it's with Mars, the 8th lord. So you bet Rahu has it in for me to break a few bones, right?
Right.
Right? But then if you have to judge it, and then you have to go on to Rahu. How is Rahu in this Varga? And so whatever house Rahu is in,
I was going to ask you that. So knowing that you're saying that if Saturn is trashed in the birth chart, Rahu will not be able to support. But what about Rahu in position in Navamsha chart, Trimsamsha, Sastiyamsha, Dasamsha? How will you then judge those placements if you're already saying that, okay, Saturn in the birth chart is not good, Rahu's trash, but then in individual charts, what if it's beautifully placed, exalted positions? How will you interpret that?
You want to look in the Rashi chart to understand that Rahu is going to take you down that path. You're going to focus a lot on this in your area of life. Whatever house Rahu's in, you're going to focus on that area of life a lot.
Okay.
And it'll have some extreme up and down stuff most likely, but it'll have extreme stuff one way or the other. So once you know the house, you need to focus on the Varga that's most important to that house. So if Rahu's in the 9th house, you're going to need to look at the 9th house Vargas, most notably the Navamsha and the D45, which are very critical for 9th house analysis.
The Chatravasamsa chart you're talking?
Yes, Chaturvimsamsha. Okay. Because you just, to find out what Varga is critical to a house, for people who don't know, like 45th Varga, 12, which is the amount of houses there are, goes into 45 3 times with the remainder 9. So 9th house is the critical house because you go around 3 times, go through the houses 3 times, and you go 9th to 9th houses. If Rahu's in your 2nd house, focus on the horror chart. If Rahu's in your 4th house, focus on the 4th Varga and also the D40 chart. Okay, so you need to just look at it and always look, anytime you look at Rahu and Ketu, the most important Varga in general for Rahu and Ketu is the Dwadasamsha, the 12th Varga. Okay, so always analyze them there, and that will adapt things. You know, if you get a person who's got Rahu, say, in the 4th house, and then Rahu in the D4 is in really bad shape, yeah, go ahead, predict they're going to be homeless and wandering around the face of the earth with nowhere to live and penniless with no savings. But if Rahu's in the 4th house and the D4 is fantastic, predict them finally getting their dream home, things like that. So it, but whatever it is, you're going to get extreme.
Now, I'm sure many people are probably commenting and saying that, what about like Vim Samsa, Trim Samsa chart where Rahu, Ketu are together? What is the essence of that, in your opinion?
Okay. Ultimately, we sort of have to complete this Rahu journey. After Rahu's plan number 8, after you get to the state of being friendly with the whole world, because you realize everything, every experience, the fulfillment of every experience is dependent on your subjective reality and not the concrete reality, then you could be at peace with any concrete reality. If you're not at peace with your concrete reality because you still think there's something out there that can make up for your subjective misery, miserability, miseliness, whatever, your subjective pain, right? And nothing can. And Rahu, if you understand that, and that's what Rahu wants to teach us, then the next step is Ketu, which is a healthy person, a healthy Rahu person without the compulsions of needing to fulfill empty holes that can never be filled, whether it's through wine, whiskey, drugs, fast cars, whatever, then that healthy person is still not complete because they're still separated from God's consciousness, right? And then they still need to go to the 9th planet, which is the divine friendship, which is when we're once again conscious with that divinity that everything in life is. And so then we see ourselves constantly surrounded by divinity ultimately. And then we're happy in a divine way, rather just in a really healthy psychological way, the way Rahu's capable of, but rarely realized, okay? Because these are hard things we're talking about.
Right.
But the point I want to make is, don't blame your Rahu miseries on Rahu. Blame them on your subjective holes. And the fact that every one of that holes makes you say, I lost my this. I don't have my, nobody loves my sorry ass, whatever it is.
Right.
Okay. I and mine are getting in your way. So in these higher Vargas, Rahu and Ketu come together. Now, a lot of people in all the Vargas, they just calculate Rahu, and then they put Ketu in the 7th always.
Yeah.
Like some software will have Ketu in the 7th from Rahu in all the Vargas. But if you actually calculate the degree of Rahu and the degree of Ketu for their Vargas, in a lot of the higher Vargas, they're going to be together. That lets us know that all those Vargas are going to be important for ultimate growth of our consciousness. All those Vargas are really important. Like, let's take the D30. D30 is such a critical Varga. In fact, there are certain Vargas that cause the planet to be more or less auspicious. Those are the Sapta Vargas. Rashi, Hora, Drekana, Saptamsha, Navamsha, Dwadasamsha. Those are all real people in our lives. Our parents, our siblings, our spouse, our children. They all have to do with people. And then we have the Trim Samsha. Trim Samsha doesn't rule people. It has to do with health and disease. But it also rules a living entity, a living consciousness. And that living entity, that living consciousness is nature. The life of this planet, the life of this earth, the life of everything on it. Okay? The Trim Samsha is the fate due to our relationship with nature. Just like the Saptamsha is our fate based on our relationship with our children. And the Drekana is our fate based on our relationships with our siblings and associates.
And is this why?
What?
Is this why Trim Samsa also shows the nature of a woman? Because nature is actually feminine?
Definitely. Exactly. Perfect insight. You bet. Nature is stronger in women. Thank God, because we all need more nature, especially in this day and age.
Absolutely, yeah.
You know, one thing you're going to find of all enlightened people, all people who truly advance spiritually, they love nature and they see God in nature. I don't care what religion they are. Saint Francis, one of the greatest Christian saints, equal to Christ himself, he wrote poems about the sun and the moon and the nature. Brother Lawrence of the Resurrection, who became enlightened upon looking at a tree. And he looked at a tree and all of a sudden his conscience expanded to see the whole world as God. And forever after that, he always had God with him. They learn that spirit or nature is an emblem or a symbol of spirit. Ralph Waldo Emerson, the great naturalist of the 1800s, he literally said that nature is a symbol of spirit, or an emblem, they call it. Everything in nature is divine, and divine communicating to us. And unfortunately, even astrology is. The planets are just part of nature, right? They're just a part of nature, of our solar system, which is a part of nature. So we have a relationship to nature. People with Trastram D30s have a bad relationship with nature. So they're not going to have good astrology readings. Look at Ketu in that chart. If in the D30 Ketu is trash, they won't get good astrology readings. Because Ketu is astronomy. Yeah. And that's nature. So we have to not only have good relationships with the people in our lives, ruled by those other 6 Vargas, we need to have good relationship with nature. If we abuse nature, if we're cruel to nature, if we take advantage of nature, if we rape nature, if we do what's unnatural, we pay a karmic price. And those 7 Vargas they're used in Shadbala. The other Vargas aren't used in Shadbala, only these 7. These are the Vargas we get karma, both good and bad, from. These planets, these Vargas, we also get the Shubha and Ashubha Phala, the auspicious and inauspicious points of the planets. The more of those, the stronger the yoga of a planet. So say you see Gajakasara yoga. Yeah. One person, it lifts them to the mat, they make them get their first job and only job at McDonald's. Yeah. Another person becomes a millionaire. Why the difference? Well, because of the quantity that yoga is going to give. One of the things that impact the quantity are the Shubha and Ashubha points, based on those 7 Vargas, not on any of the other Vargas. Right. It's our relationship with the people in our lives and nature that determine our good and bad karma. Most people ignore nature and they wonder why their lives can't work. So, but
that's amazing, because I was living in California. Yeah. And suddenly, eccentrically, I decided to come all the way across in northern DC, in the middle of wilderness, middle of country. Perfect. Like you can see horses and cows ranging on the road. I mean, there's a whole reason why I did that, but there was this eagerness to just be close to nature. I didn't want to be next to Hollywood and these concrete jungle of buildings and people. I had it. I told my wife one day, I'm like, that's it. I want to get away. I want to go somewhere. Yeah. So I'm like, where can we affordably get a property, get somewhere? We looked at everywhere, including Sedona. We looked at everywhere, including Utah. Yeah. And then suddenly we saw this northern Washington near Potomac, Washington, where we're like, that's it. And she had her school here, so we're like, we're moving here. But I wanted to ask you one thing, and this is I'm deviating from our talk with Rahu. Maybe it's related to Rahu, but the planet that they just found, the new planet, is this had something to do with energy of Krishna? How we have Brahma, Vishnu, and Shiva, where this new planet, which is affecting everything else in our solar system, according to scientists, has anything to do with the energy of Krishna now coming towards us, because the orbit of this planet X is now coming close to us, as they're saying.
Yeah. Well, all the planets are considered to be, manifestations of Vishnu, right?
Right.
And of course, Krishna, Vishnu, same consciousness, right?
Well, you know how you assigned
But
Uranus in your video, what you did with me, Uranus to Brahma, and then Vishnu, and then Shiva.
So to Pluto. I wouldn't, so I know I wouldn't relate it to Krishna, simply because Krishna is an avatar of Vishnu that's already related to the moon, right? And as much as we love Krishna, I don't think there's gonna be two of them. Okay. So, and honestly, I haven't really tried studying that planet to kind of see what it could be. And it's quite interesting. I mean, this orbit of this planet is so slow.
Yeah.
It's this fixed thing. And so when we have Brahma, Vishnu, and Shiva, which is Uranus, Neptune, and Pluto, what is left after Brahma, Vishnu, and Shiva, right?
That's why I was picking Krishna. I'm like, Krishna is going.
And you can call it Krishna if you want, but I would call it the Brahman is what I would call, not Brahma, Brahman, right?
Brahman. Okay.
Or something like that. It has to be something like that. It has to be, especially because it's so slow moving. So according to Parashar in the first chapter, he says the absolute can never be seen. So it can't be the absolute because we can see it, right?
Yeah.
And the absolute manifests 25% of himself, a quarter of himself as creation. And the rest remains always unseen.
That's why we have so much of black matter and dark energy in the universe versus the 25 or 2% of matter.
Whatever it is, yeah. So, and all these are more energies, which is also matter, So, but anyway, so it could be that we could say something that defines that 25% more. Like Uranus, Neptune, and Pluto all operate through the other planets to a greater or lesser degree, depending on what they're influencing in your chart. So Brahma, Vishnu, and Shiva, Brahma is really creating with the planets that Uranus is influencing. Shiva is really breaking our ego down with the planets that Pluto is influencing, okay? And Neptune is helping us, and Vishnu is helping us connect to all things, to be one with everything in creation, more through the planets that he's directly influencing in the chart. But then what energizes them? It's that 25% of the absolute energizes them first, right? And so I would say that planet, the only last step you can go is to that, it's that 25%, that consciousness in creation that is making it all happen, that reveals itself. But there's still 75% of that divine consciousness which doesn't reveal itself.
Yeah. Okay.
So a Krishna devotee would call that Krishna. A Ram devotee would call it Rama, right?
Well, the only reason I was doing this, because in Srimad Bhagavatam, how they say it's on one of the mandala is Brahma, then above him is Vishnu, and then above him is Shiva, but then on the very, very top is the Krishna mandala. So I'm like, if we have found these three higher consciousness of planets, I'm like the one that is now just discovered, and the end of Kali Yuga is already in transition to Dwapar Yuga. Krishna is coming back in a form of this planetary energy to help our consciousness.
Yeah, and of course, Krishna, Narasimha, Rama, and Varaha all have a fully divine consciousness. they're all the same fully. They have no individual consciousness, no jiva consciousness the way the other avatars did. So you could call it Varaha, you could call it Krishna, you could call it Rama, you could call it Narasimha. It wouldn't matter.
And if you also
all, if someone's fully divine consciousness, that's the end of the road. It's only that, right?
Now, if you were saying that how Neptune is Vishnu, but then we also hear that Surya, Vishnu is also one of the deities of Surya and Jupiter. So in a way, we can have multiple.
Yeah, but see, what you'll find is that if you look at all the Vedic astrology books, you're going to get a lot of deities related to a lot of planets.
Yeah.
And honestly, they're just not right.
Okay.
You have to focus on what Jaimini has to say and what Parashar have to say. There's a lot of other stuff, especially there's a lot of books that just give these lists of stuff.
Yeah.
Like there's this one book, I finally forgot the name. It starts with
see, redundantly written, Surya is connected to Vishnu, Jupiter is connected to Vishnu. You know how Venus is
there's books that relate that. I would never look at it that way though. I think when you start doing that, you're going to cross your wires. I just don't think those books are very clear in their insight.
So even the Ishta Devta concept that we look for might be wrong then too, according to.
For Ishta Deva, you need to follow Jaimini.
Okay.
And Surya is Shiva.
Okay.
And it is. If people who do advanced yoga, they're literally moving their inner sun through their zodiac of their chakras. And the sound that makes is the sound of Shiva's name. You know, that sound of the sun moving through the heavens is Shiva's name. So people who have done that and experienced that sound know that the sun is Shiva, you know. And Shiva is Yogeshwar, the Lord of the Yogis, right?
Yeah.
Yeah. So, but yeah, you'll see in all the astrology books out there, you'll see people relating every planet to every deity. If you get all the books and compare them all, you're going to have Jupiter, Ganesha, Ketu. You're just going to shoot yourself.
Amplifies that because then you'll find 500 websites.
Yeah. So then when they say
and telling you the exact same.
Yeah. So you can say, oh, the sun is indicating your Ishta. So pick any deity you want.
Yeah, exactly.
Because somewhere you could support it, right?
Yeah, exactly.
So you really have to follow Jaimini with that. You have to remember, Jaimini was lost to the world for a very long time. So most books out there don't follow Jaimini, even a lot of the old textbooks.
And how would you consider Rishi Bhrigu compared to Jaimini and Parashara and his knowledge on Jyotish?
Well, Bhrigu, of course, was a fantastic astrologer. Unfortunately, the Bhrigu stuff that's floating around, the majority of it's just all loose stuff. So much stuff attributed. We don't know if it's Bhrigu. It's like there's so much stuff, Bhrigu this, Bhrigu that. They call it Bhrigu. One thing's useful, one thing's not.
Yeah.
It's like it's not. There's no concise system of that. It's all been lost, you know. Really, the only concise thing we have is Jaimini. Even Parashar is a hodgepodge with lots of junk in it that you got to be careful with because it was recompiled in the 1800s,
right? After
being lost for 1,000 years almost. Whereas Jaimini, it's there, but you have to decode the sutras, and if you make one error, you're going to make all kinds of mistakes. So it's going to take centuries before we get to the roots of a lot of these issues we deal with as astrologers. You know, we're not, like I've said, astrology will get perfected in the Tretra Yuga, not the Dwapara Yuga.
Okay, that's the Yuga.
So it's a long ways away. So we're just a bunch of idiots compared to what's going
to happen. Starting the process to go there.
Yeah, we're just saying, hey, there's something wrong here.
Yeah, let's correct it.
And one of them is distributing all these
Thank you planets. So much. This was, I'm telling you, this is why I'm always just eager to have you on, because I'm like, we can have all day session. It will not end with your knowledge. So thank you so much for giving us your experience on Rahu and what you are experiencing. And hopefully, more experience you get, the more we'll learn for the next 18 years.
Yeah, I don't think Rahu's going to kill me now, so I think I'll be around to let you know anything new.
Great. And by the way, so in order to get your massive traffic ×4 this time, what is your website so people can log on to
it's fine, but actually, The best place to go now is the astrology-videos.com,
Okay.
because not only do I have about 600 hours of video,
Okay.
I'm also
Wow.
moving all my old audio courses there. I've done the
Okay.
600 hours of videos is everything I've taught since spring of 2011, in the last 5 years. But I have 10 years of audio courses, maybe not 10 years, like 6, 8 years of audio courses before that. So hundreds of hours of audio courses, including the 3 first Gemini courses. And all that stuff I'm moving over to the video website.
Okay.
So you can get everything for $29.95 a month.
Perfect, guys. Let's crash Ernest's website tonight.
Yeah, crash it.
Log on to that website. Hopefully he can handle it.
I don't know. If not, I'll just wake up to a lot of work tomorrow.
Great. Thank you so much, Ernest.
Take care.
Absolutely. Bye-bye.